You know the drill. Real human voice, not an AI. Let's get going. People, what is a surprisingly unknown survival fact that everyone should know? Story 1. If you get stuck in your car in the snow, stay with your vehicle. Hypothermia makes you delirious and you can wander the wrong direction and freeze to expiring. Your vehicle is also a lot easier to locate than you are. When I was younger and traveled a lot, a friend from Minnesota told me to keep an unopened bottle of water, a blanket, matches, candle, and a rope in the car during the winter months. A wax candle will provide enough heat to keep the car warm enough to survive with a blanket around you. Tie the rope to the car if you get out to relieve yourself. That way you can find your way back by following the rope, if snowing. Water, well, that's obvious. Canadian here. I do the same. Also, my sleeping bag lives in my trunk during winter. Also super convenient if you need to crash on a couch after a party. The other thing is to make sure the car exhaust is clear if you keep the car running. You may very well unalive yourself by carbon monoxide otherwise. Also, if there's an empty bottle, you can pee in it and use it for warmth for a while. First of all, ew, the pee in the bottle? Ugh. But then again, you're gonna be surviving, so you gotta do what it takes. It's gross, but it would probably save your life. Probably not the story you want to tell at parties, though. Story 2. During the winter, it's way better to be slightly cold than it is to sweat. If you start to sweat, you can go hypothermic way faster. Reminds me of a quote from Bear Grylls. I need to work quickly before hypothermia sets in, but not too quickly because then I'll start to sweat, the sweat will freeze, and then hypothermia sets in. While he's technically on the right path, he's also a total hack and spews a bunch of awful, awful advice. Edit. Well, this comment blew up. Let me briefly explain why I think he's a hack. I come from an extensive background of technical rock climbing and alpinism, and every bit of media he has put out on my sport is pure and utter nonsense, such as this video where he is on a beginner-rated route at 5.5, climbing very, very poorly, pretending as if it's something rad, exaggerating the remoteness of where he is. Actually 5 miles down the road from Vegas in the Calico Basin at a popular climbing spot for beginners, wearing ridiculous gear and making an obscene amount of mistakes, many of which would get him hurt or killed if he fell. There are many more like this one. Yes, he climbed Everest by the mountaineering route, hike up. But so could any fit person who is taken on by a guiding service and can slide a Jumar up a rope. His Everett ascent is presented as climbing expertise, yet anyone who is well acquainted with the sport knows he hasn't even scratched the surface of alpinism or climbing. And this, combined with his climbing content, makes it clear that he has no substantive knowledge of the activity. He comes across as somebody that chases titles, but learns very little actual expertise. Is not at all an expert on what he presents. He's a good showman and military man, but that's about it when it comes to adventure. I didn't realize we were going to be roasting a bear in this video. What does bear taste like? Apparently it tastes like inexperience. Do you think other people in the climbing world have this same opinion about him? Story 3. If you're somehow in a situation where you feel like you could drown and have no energy to go on, turn on your back and do the backstroke. Saved my life while at the beach last week after getting sucked out by rip current. Float for your life. For people who aren't comfortable floating, focus on keeping your belly up, like a balloon full of air. If you spread out your arms, it might make things easier. If you can't fully backstroke because maybe you can't stay on top of the water well enough or you can't extend your arms like that, swim like a frog by lifting your arms above your head, then pushing them back towards your body. Think like jumping jacks, but while lying down. Story 4. If you're drinking plenty of water but still showing signs of dehydration, headache, fatigue, muscle aches, blurred vision, or stumbling around, you may be low on electrolytes. Salty foods can really help with this, but rehydration salts such as Pedialyte work even better and should probably be in more people's backpacks. Disclaimer. Those symptoms aren't limited to dehydration and can also occur due to heat exhaustion, hypothermia, or altitude sickness. You just solved a big problem for me. Holy hell. I forgot about my salts. Drip Drop. It's like Pedialyte balanced for adults. I drink it in the backcountry after long runs or when I make poor decisions regarding whiskey. It helps so much. Story 5. Water filters are really easy to make. 1 layer of gravel and a layer of sand split half and half on your container will pull most stuff out. Just boil the water before drinking. Glasses lenses can be used to start a fire. Think magnifying glass. Much easier than the two sticks method. Irrigation canals and culverts make mediocre shelter from tornadoes, but better than nothing. Lay flat and point your feet in the direction of the wind if in an open ditch. Same advice applies for explosions. Lightning will strike the same place twice. Coyotes are not friendly nor wily. If lost in the wilderness, order of survival is shelter, fire, water, security, food. Half of surviving is staying positive. Landlines will work if the power is out. The glasses trick only works with certain prescriptions, but I've also been told by an internet stranger a drop of water on the lens will make it work if you're nearsighted. Never tried this myself though, so take it with a grain of salt. A lot of landlines are now VoIP, internet phones. These are power dependent. I didn't realize this as I live in a province the physical size of Texas, size of France for our European friends, with only a little over 1 million people in it. We're a little slow on the upgrade outside of major centers. Edit 2. Water filter details. You'll need a waterproof container. Poke holes in the bottom and fill 1/3 to halfway with gravel. Fill the rest with the finest sand you can find. This will pull things like large sticks, some parasites, and mud out of the water. You might have to run it through a couple of times if your container is smaller, like a water bottle. It isn't guaranteed to remove bacteria, smaller parasites, and viruses out though, so boil thoroughly before drinking still. Most chemicals like pesticides will make it through as well, so try to avoid water sources downstream of agricultural areas. Bonus points if you add a layer of crushed charcoal in. It will help filter out some of the smaller stuff and absorb some of the pollution in a water supply as well. Charcoal layers should go between the sand and the gravel. Then simply flow water through it. The idea that lightning doesn't strike the same place twice has never made sense to me. If that were true, why would buildings have lightning rods on them? It's not just wrong, it's an extremely dangerous misconception for people caught in exposed areas in thunderstorms. Lightning prefers striking the same area multiple times. That's why it struck there in the first place. The path of least resistance made that area a good target, so it likely will continue being a good target. Story 6. Barrel cactus in the Sonoran Desert are not full of water as it's commonly portrayed. Instead, they're full of acidic solutions that induce vomiting and diarrhea if consumed. These can easily be fatal for a dehydrated person in the desert. The barrel cactus fruit, by contrast, is one of the most agreeable edibles in the cactus world. They're easy to pick, thornless, and tasty. If you drink it, you'll see a friendly giant mushroom. Mushy giant friend! We're walking in circles. I've seen that same spirit mushroom 5 times. Does anyone else feel like they're getting their idea about water in the desert from cartoons? I'm always thinking of cartoons where people go up to a cactus and the cartoon character pulls out a faucet and just sticks it into the cactus and they got water. That's probably not what really happens. I do think Amazon could deliver to the desert just as fast as Acme does in those cartoons, though. That coyote got a lot of cool stuff way out there. Story 7. When defending yourself, there is no need to fight fair. I tell my son, 14, this. Obviously, you do not get violent until someone else does, but if someone has the intent of hurting you, it's fair game to punch them in the spheres, or worse. If by worse you mean castrating them with your bare hands, then yes. Story 8. You can squeeze relatively safe water out of moss. Obviously, you should still boil it, and it's going to have some dirt, but it's way better than drinking out of a stream or puddle. The amount of research I've done on moss for my thesis approves that this is indeed a safe method. You seem like you have an interesting doctorate. What was the subject of your thesis? Story 9. If you accidentally disturb a beehive or wasp nest and are being swamped, do not run for water. It seems intuitive that jumping in water will keep the bees off you, but actually they'll wait for you to resurface and resume stinging you. Instead, run as fast and as far away as you can. Bees, wasps are territorial and will not easily leave their home range. So once you leave their comfort zone, you're pretty much safe. Or set yourself on fire, taps forehead. Use a cotton ball soaked in Vaseline or a tampon. Story 10. A mirror is the best way to signal for help. You can use the reflection of the sun directed at a boat or plane like your sibling would to annoy you. The proper way to use a mirror to signal for help is to hold up one hand with a peace sign and position it so that whatever you're trying to signal can be seen between your fingers. Then shine the light from the mirror on your fingers. This guarantees that whatever you're signaling can see the light. Ooh, that's a good tip. I didn't think about that, especially with going for airplanes or boats that are a long way away. I was thinking about how to aim as I was reading this story. Actually, when I was reading it and they were saying put up a peace sign, I thought they were trying to do some sort of shadow puppet thing. I was imagining the person in the boat or the plane seeing some sort of light on their wall and it was a shadow puppet like a bunny or something. Yes, I'm stupid, I know. Story 11. Just because you're drinking water doesn't mean you're safe. You need to take in salt as well. I've seen this kick people's butts big time. They drink and drink and drink water, but still overheat and throw up and pass out because they didn't take in any salt or electrolytes. I didn't learn until I started taking holidays to hotter places than normal that I can be quite sensitive to the heat. I thought I was doing a good job looking after myself and drinking plenty of water, but 2 holidays in a row I ended up throwing up from the heat and honestly feel pretty awful. After the second time, I did a bit of research how to better look after myself. Again, I was drinking plenty of water so I wasn't dehydrated, and found out that throwing up from the heat can be a symptom of drinking too much water without replenishing the salts. Started making sure to drink things like Gatorade and adding a little sports salt replenishment to my water, and haven't had a problem since. Story 12. If you are lost in the wilderness, if you have shelter and a source of water, and if you have a reason to believe people will be looking for you, you're usually better to stay put than to try to find your way out. Wandering around lost, you expend a lot of energy. You could easily get into a far worse situation, and anyone looking for you will likely start at your last known or expected location, which, if you're lost, you might be wandering further from. This is not always the case. It depends on if you're injured or not, and the nature of the injuries, on your relative safety where you're at, how far you are relative to your expected or last known location, how visible you are, and a number of other situational factors. It's also worth a low-risk climb to a better vantage point if possible. People have expired a few hundred meters from a road which could have led them to safety. This is very good advice. If they know what area you're in, they'll simply grid it off and start doing line searches. If you stay stationary, they will find you. Has anyone ever been lost and then gone to a higher plane and just figured out that they were actually close to a road or some sort of building or civilization? That would kind of suck. You're like, great, I'm cold, hungry, and thirsty, and now I find out that I'm an idiot. Almost literally insult to injury. Story 13. The ability to weave. Looked at as more of a craft than a survival skill. But my grandma taught me that if you can weave, you can make clothing, shoes, traps, shelter, etc., with nothing more than the vegetation on hand. This was hammered home later when watching that show with naked survival people. The guy harassed the girl because she spent most of the first 2 days weaving, but in the end, he had to be taken out because he was sick, yet there she was having crab for dinner. Naked and Afraid. My son and I love that show. You can really tell who is and isn't prepared for it. My favorite episode was the fat guy whose whole strategy was to sit around living off his fat reserves while the other people actually tried to hunt and build, etc. Story 14. Very rarely are people mentally prepared to fight a naked man. My buddy's fight strategy is to take off his shirt in a fight. If the other guy still wants to fight, he takes down his pants. I've rarely seen it go past there. Is his name Randy? Story 15. Dryer lint is super effective for starting fires. Also, why you should clean the freaking lint trap.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 16. Contrary to popular belief, if an alligator is chasing you, you should not run in zigzag. Do one zig, then run straight. The alligator is not going to try to follow the zigzag. It will just run for you straight and you'll be slower. Do one zig so that the alligator will have to do one zig if it wants to get you, and then just run in a straight line like your butt is on fire. Edit. Do not provoke an alligator or crocodile. This is meant for people that somehow accidentally provoke them. I am not an expert. I was told this by a guy that worked with handling alligators. If you leave an alligator alone, they will leave you alone. Was told that crocs were more aggressive. Just stay the hell away from both types of animals. Thanks for the award. It's my first one. Imagine how dumb you look from the alligator's point of view if you zigzag. Alligators probably all like, yep, This is natural selection at its finest. Story 17. The majority of animals are scared of explosive noises, so the bang snap toy can save your life. Edit. Wow, guys, thanks for my most upvoted comment yet. Edit 2. First award, too? Thanks. If chased by a bear, do the bend and snap. Got it. Not if you're surrounded by the police. Story 18. If you're trapped in an extremely cold environment, a rudimentary igloo will keep you relatively warm if you're smart about it. They keep heat in fairly well. However, always be sure to mark where you are with something that won't get covered in snow, so if rescue comes, they don't miss you in the snow. You don't need to actually build an igloo. That's a lot of work. In Norway, we learned that if you get caught out in a blizzard, dig a cave in the snow and seal it with a few blocks of snow as best you can. Edit. Many have pointed out that you need to keep a couple of holes open for air. The easiest way to do it is to leave your ski poles sticking through the wall and jiggle them a little now and then. That only works with soft snow, right? That feels like you're working at cross purposes. You need to use the environment and the snow to keep you warm, but you also need something that's not snow to make you stand out. Maybe you could take some sort of clothing that's not needed to keep you warm and tie it to the ski pole that you've got making a hole in your igloo and use that as sort of a makeshift flag? Or am I overthinking this? Story 19. If you're stabbed with something and that object is still stuck in you, don't freaking pull it out. EMT trainee here. In a different program, now due to COVID-19 circumstances, but in my old program, one of the instructors told us of an EMT who had just started and was being observed by a paramedic on a stabbing call. The patient had been stabbed in the chest with the knife still in there, and the first thing the trainee did was pull the damn thing out. Paramedic yells at him, and then he sticks the knife back in. Patient ends up expiring, and the EMT got charged with manslaughter. Edit. This really was a story. I was told by a previous EMT instructor, but if others have heard it, it could be a scared straight sort of urban legend. And holy hell, I have never had this big an inbox or upvotes. He put it back in? Holy hell. Story 20. If you don't know for sure what you're eating, most animals are safe to eat. Most plants will make you sick. Clearly, hundreds of exceptions. But if you know nothing, steer toward killing Bambi before eating leaves. Also, a diet of solely rabbit will make you stupid and dead. Something apparently seriously lacking in the nutrition provided. I saw an account of an experienced wilderness guy who could catch loads of rabbit and nothing much else. Kept a diary. Coherency of the writing deteriorated, then stopped. Edit. I tried to find the document I saw it in, but can't. From memory, it was a somewhat old 1940s or 1960s survival manual that someone had scanned. It didn't have a copy of the diary referred to, but it felt like the author had known the particular person he was talking about. I found a reference to Into the Wild, which sounds similar, but I don't think that's it. It must have been 10 years ago that I read it, so take the detail with a grain of salt. Story 21. Don't mess with garage door springs. Holy hell, this. My boss degloved his left hand trying to remove an old garbage door spring. Not at all pretty. Guys, don't Google degloving. Trust me when I say he probably wasn't wearing gloves to begin with. Story 22. I used to be a military cadet when I was a teenager. The most important thing I've been taught to take care of is my feet. He mentioned how if you're gonna wash one thing, that it should be your feet, as you take them for granted. Think of how difficult it is to get out of a survival situation where you have trench foot. Even if you're in a spot where you can't wash your feet, just take your boots or shoes and socks off and let them air out and dry. Also, if it's extremely cold weather, put your boots inside your sleeping bag at the bottom when you sleep. Your body heat will keep them from freezing, and you won't have to spend hours wearing ice-cold boots. Story 23. I've got two. If you're ever caught in a rip current, swim perpendicular to it. If you swim into it, you will expire. If you let it carry you out to sea and you aren't a strong swimmer, you will expire. If anyone ever is trying to get you to a second location via abduction, fight like hell and make a massive scene. Even if you're unalived on the spot, that's better than whatever they've got in store for you. Story 24. A towel is the most useful thing to have. You can dry yourself if you're wet, but it's also a blanket if you're cold, can give shade if it's warm, or you can use it to wipe your sweat. It's a hat, a cushion, a bag. Wrap it around your head to ward off noxious fumes or avoid the gaze of the ravenous bug bladder beast of trawl. More importantly, a towel has immense psychological value. For some reason, if a strag discovers that a hitchhiker has his towel with him, he will automatically assume that he is also in possession of a toothbrush, washcloth, soap, tin of biscuits, flask, compass, map, ball of string, gnat spray, wet weather gear, spacesuit, etc., etc. Furthermore, the strag will then happily lend the hitchhiker any of these or a dozen other items that the hitchhiker might accidentally have lost. What the strag will think is that any man who can hitch the length and breadth of the galaxy, rough it, slum it, struggle against terrible odds, win through, and still knows where his towel is clearly a man to be reckoned with. One of my favorite books of all time. All respect due to the late, great Douglas Adams. I always loved the narration from the radio and the TV series. I always wanted to narrate a version of that wherever it got translated to. Stephen Fry did a great job of narrating that story in the movies. Story 28. You can remove the top of most car seats to break the windows of your car in case you can't open the doors. Especially useful if you drive into a lake or something like that. Edit. Not all cars can get this done. Not all are removable or sturdy enough for this, but it's an option of last resort. Just get a window hammer. They're dirt cheap and often come as part of a tool you wanted anyways. In my case, it's also a seatbelt cutter, pocket knife, and magnesium strip. Edit. To those asking, magnesium strips are fire starters. Strike them with steel to get spark. Story 26. Exposure and dehydration will mess you up much faster than hunger. Bring spare socks. Your feet will rot if you don't. Story 27. Rule of threes. 3 minutes without air. You gone. 3 hours exposed to extreme weather. You gone. 3 days without water. You gone. 3 weeks without food. You gone. Edit. Damn, this blew up. A lot of people splitting hairs. The idea is it's easy to remember and it keeps your priorities in order. Yeah, some people can live longer than 3 days without water or 3 minutes without air, but you're not really thriving, and your average person may not make it. It's a memory device. Thanks for the award. Top comment ever.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.